You're not getting older, you're just doing aging wrong. The Shaolin monks knew this 1 to 500 years ago. And if you feel like life's passing you by, these 10 truths will flip everything you think about time, struggle, and growing older. Most people think aging means slowing down, that your best years are behind you. But the Shaolin monks, they saw time differently. For them, age wasn't a limit, it was fuel. A master at 60 could move faster, think sharper, and fight harder than a reckless 20-year-old. How? Because they followed principles most people never learn. Today we're breaking down 10 Shaolin truths that change what it means to grow older, and how to do it with power, not regret. 1. The body obeys the mind. Your limits are mostly lies. You wake up one morning and your knee cracks. You try to bend down and your back groans. You catch your reflection and think, I'm not as young as I used to be. That's the moment you lose. Not because your body is failing, but because your mind just told it to. The Shaolin monks understood something modern science is only now catching up to. Your body doesn't decide your limits, your mind does. Think about it. A 70-year-old Shaolin master can balance on one finger, leap across uneven stones, or take a strike to the ribs without flinching. Meanwhile, a 30-year-old office worker throws out his back, picking up a pencil. Is the monk's body magically younger? He's just spent decades training his mind to override the lies most people accept as truths. Here's how it works. When you're young, you don't question what your body can do. You climb trees, sprint after friends, fall and get back up without a second thought. Then somewhere along the way you're told, be careful, you're not a kid anymore at your age, and bit by bit, you start moving like an old person, not because you have to, but because you've been programmed to. The Shaolin called this the prison of the mind. You build walls where none exist. You see a staircase and think, that'll hurt my knees, so you take the elevator. Your muscles weaken, not from age, but from disuse. Your joints stiffen, not because they're worn out, but because you've stopped testing them. But the monks, they do the opposite. They see a 50-foot pole and think, I will climb it. Not because they're reckless, but because they know the body adapts to whatever the mind demands. If you tell yourself, I'm too old to learn martial arts, your body will agree. If you say, I can still get stronger, it has no choice but to obey. This isn't motivational fluff, it's physiology. When you push past self-imposed limits, your muscles rebuild, your bones thicken, your nervous system rewires itself to meet the challenge. The only thing stopping you is the story you keep repeating. Take the Shaolin stance training. A beginner shakes after 30 seconds in a horse stance, legs burning, thighs trembling. His mind screams, quit, but the master makes him hold it for 10 minutes. How? Not by brute force, but by rewiring the dialogue. The master doesn't say, it's okay, stop when it hurts. He says, the pain is the lesson, breathe into it, let it teach you. And something wild happens. The student lasts long, not because his muscles changed in 5 minutes, but because his mind stopped seeing pain as a threat and started seeing it as a signal. That's the secret. The body doesn't collapse from exhaustion, it collapses when the mind decides it's had enough. Now apply this to your life. That thing you've wanted to try, dancing, hiking, learning an instrument, but talked yourself out of because you're too old. Replay the script. What if instead of, I look stupid, you thought, my body will figure it out? The first time you try a push-up, you might struggle, but the 100th time, your arms don't magically get stronger. Your brain just stops panicking and recruits more muscle fibers. That's how an 80-year-old yogi can hold a handstand, not because she's defying biology, but because she respects it. She knows the body is a servant, not a master. It will do whatever you consistently ask of it. This is why aging hits people so differently. Some are frail at 50, others are winning marathons at 70. The difference isn't genes or luck, it's the voice in their head. One person hears, "You're getting older," and slows down. Another hears the same words and thinks, "Then I'd better move more." The Shaolin didn't live longer because of special herbs or secret techniques. They lived stronger because they refused to let a number dictate their potential. So next time you catch yourself saying, "I can't," pause, ask, "Is this truly my body speaking or just my fear?" Because the truth is, your limits are rarely physical, they're mental. And that's good news, because while you can't turn back time, you can change your mind. And when you do, your body will have no choice but to follow. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Mastery beats speed. You ever watch a beginner try to learn something new? They rush, they fumble, they get frustrated when they're not instantly good at it. Now watch a Shaolin master perform the same movement. Every motion is deliberate, every breath is timed. There's no wasted energy, no unnecessary tension. It looks effortless, but that's the illusion of mastery. What you're seeing isn't speed, it's precision, and precision always beats haste in the long run. Here's the thing most people get wrong. They confuse fast progress with real progress. They want to see results immediately, so they skip steps, take shortcuts, and end up building on shaky foundations. The Shaolin knew better. They'd spend years, sometimes an entire lifetime, perfecting a single form. Not because they were slow learners, but because they understood something critical. True skill isn't about how quickly you can do something. It's about how little you waste when you do it. Think about how a river cuts through rock. It's not because the water is strong in any one moment. It's because it's consistent. Drop by drop, day by day, it flows in the same direction. Over time, that persistence carves canyons. The Shaolin approach to mastery works the same way. They don't train for explosive progress. They train for inevitable progress. A student might practice the same kick 1,000 times before it's combat ready. To an outsider, it looks like stagnation, but to the master, that repetition is the whole point. Every time the student throws that kick, they're not just moving their leg, they're rewiring their nervous system. They're turning something that once required conscious thought into something that happens automatically, flawlessly, without hesitation. That's how you build skill that lasts. This applies to everything, not just martial arts. Want to learn an instrument? You'll progress faster by practicing one song perfectly at half speed than by stumbling through 10 songs at full tempo. Want to get stronger? Lifting lighter weights with perfect form will get you further than ego lifting with bad technique. The modern world loves shortcuts, but the Shaolin knew the truth. There's no such thing. Every time you try to skip ahead, you're actually taking the long way around. Here's why this matters for aging. When you're young, speed feels like an advantage. You can recover from mistakes quickly. You can brute force your way through challenges. But as you get older, that approach stops working. Your body won't tolerate bad form. Your mind won't retain sloppy learning. That's when the Shaolin method becomes your greatest weapon. By focusing on doing things right, not fast, you build skills that don't degrade with age. A master's punch isn't powerful because he's strong. It's powerful because every muscle, every tendon, every ounce of energy is aligned perfectly. That kind of efficiency only comes from slowing down first. So if you feel like you're falling behind, here's the counterintuitive solution. Go slower, not because you can't keep up, but because rushing is what's actually holding you back. Mastery isn't a race, it's a rhythm. Find yours and you'll outlast everyone who sprinted past you at the start. Pain is the teacher, comfort is the trap. There's a moment in every person's life when they have to choose between what feels good now and what builds strength for later. Modern society has made this choice easier than ever. We have pills for every ache, apps for every inconvenience, and distractions to avoid facing anything uncomfortable. But the Shaolin monks knew something we've forgotten. Pain isn't the enemy. In fact, it might be the most honest teacher you ever had. Think about how we react to discomfort today. A slight headache? Immediately reach for medicine. A tough workout? Skip it because it's hard. A challenging conversation? Avoid it to keep the peace. We've built entire lives around dodging anything that causes even momentary distress. But here's the paradox. In avoiding all pain, we've become weaker, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. The Shaolin did the opposite. They didn't just accept pain, they welcomed it as part of their training, not because they enjoyed suffering, but because they understood what it represented: growth, waiting to happen. Take their physical training methods. A Shaolin student wouldn't just practice forms in perfect conditions. They'd stand barefoot in snow until their feet went numb, then continue training as feeling returned. They'd hold deep stances until their muscles trembled and sweat poured down their faces. Why? Because they knew comfort creates fragility. When you only ever experience perfect conditions, the slightest change breaks you. But when you regularly push past what feels easy, you build resilience that applies to everything in life. That stiffness in your joints when you wake up, it's not a sign you should move less. It's your body begging you to move more. That mental resistance you feel when facing a difficult task, it's not proof you can't do it. It's the exact feeling that precedes breakthroughs. This principle extends far beyond physical training. Consider how we handle emotional pain today. At the first sign of heartbreak, we numb ourselves with distractions. When faced with failure, we quickly shift blame rather than sit with the discomfort of our own shortcomings. The Shaolin approach would be different. They'd teach you to lean into these moments, to examine them closely, because that's where the real lessons live. When you stop running from emotional pain, you start seeing patterns in your behavior. You notice what triggers you, where your weaknesses lie, and how you might grow stronger in those areas. Avoiding pain might feel better in the moment, but it guarantees you'll keep making the same mistakes. There's a neurological basis for this. When you push through physical discomfort, your brain creates new neural pathways. When you sit with emotional discomfort, you develop greater emotional regulation. The pain itself isn't the point, it's the adaptation that follows. This is why the most capable people in any field aren't those who've had the easiest paths, but those who've learned to use difficulty as fuel. A martial artist doesn't become formidable by only practicing moves they've already mastered. A musician doesn't improve by only playing songs they already know perfectly. Growth lives at the edge of your current abilities, that place where things don't feel smooth yet, where mistakes happen, where frustration arises. Modern life has convinced us that happiness comes from avoiding all discomfort, but the Shaolin knew a deeper truth. Real fulfillment comes from becoming someone who can handle discomfort with grace. When you stop seeing pain as something to avoid at all costs, and start seeing it as feedback, as your body and mind telling you where you need to grow, everything changes. That soreness after exercise, it's not proof you should quit. It's evidence your body is adept. That anxiety before a big challenge, it's not a sign to retreat. It's your system preparing for peak performance. This isn't about seeking out unnecessary suffering. It's about recognizing that the things we instinctively avoid are often exactly what we need. Next time you feel that internal resistance, whether it's to physical effort, emotional honesty, or mental concentration, pause. Instead of turning away, lean in slightly, not to the point of injury, but just past what feels completely comfortable. That's where the magic happens. That's where you outgrow your former self. The Shaolin didn't become legendary warriors by taking the easy path. They became strong by walking directly into what others avoided and learning its lessons. Your pain isn't your enemy. It's your most truthful instructor, if you're brave enough to listen.
4. The breath is the anchor. Control it, control everything. In the middle of chaos, whether it's a physical fight, an emotional crisis, or just the daily overwhelm of modern life, there's one thing that remains constant: It's not your thoughts, which race uncontrollably. It's not your circumstances, which often feel outside your power. It's something far more fundamental, something you've been doing since the moment you were born, yet probably never fully mastered: your breath. The Shaolin monks understood what modern science now confirms. Breath is the bridge between body and mind. It's the only autonomic function you can also consciously control. This makes it uniquely powerful. When everything else feels like it's spinning out of control, your breath remains your anchor. But most people breathe all wrong. Shallow chest breathing keeps us in a constant state of low-grade stress. We gasp when startled, hold our breath when concentrating, and pant when anxious. All patterns that reinforce rather than calm our agitation. The Shaolin approach was different. They trained breathing as its own discipline, separate from any physical movement, because they knew: master your breath, and you master yourself. Consider how breathing works in moments of crisis. When startled, the natural reaction is to inhale sharply and hold that breath, the body's preparation for fight or flight. But this same reaction, when prolonged, creates tension, clouds thinking, and drains energy. The Shaolin method reverses this. Instead of letting circumstances dictate their breathing, they used breath to dictate their response to circumstance. Before a fight, they wouldn't tense up. They'd take slow, deep breaths to oxygenate their blood and calm their mind. During pain, they wouldn't hold their breath. They'd breathe through it, using the rhythm to maintain control. This wasn't mystical thinking, it was practical physiology. Deep, controlled breathing activates the parasympathetic nervous system, lowering heart rate and blood pressure. It increases heart rate variability, a key marker of resilience. In essence, proper breathing doesn't just reflect your state, it actively shapes it. This principle applies far beyond martial arts. Think about how you breathe when stressed at work, lightly shallow and irregular, or when trying to fall asleep with racing thoughts, perhaps holding your breath without realizing it. Now imagine approaching these situations like a Shaolin monk would, not by trying to control the uncontrollable external factors, but by first regulating what you can. A simple practice like the 4-4-4 method, inhale for 4 seconds, hold for 4, exhale for 4, does more than just calm you in the moment. With consistent practice, it rewires your baseline stress response. What once triggered panic becomes manageable. What used to overwhelm now meets a centered, grounded version of you. The brilliance of breathwork lies in its simplicity and accessibility. You don't need special equipment or perfect conditions. You can practice it in traffic, during a difficult conversation, or lying awake at night. The Shaolin would train breathing in all circumstances, while standing perfectly still, while moving through forms, even while being struck in training. This wasn't just about physical endurance, it was about cultivating unshakable presence. When your attention stays anchored in the rhythm of your breath, you can't simultaneously be lost in regrets about the past or anxieties about the future. You're forced into the present moment, which is, not coincidentally, the only place where real control exists. There's a reason breath control features prominently in nearly every wisdom tradition, from Buddhist meditation to Christian centering prayer to Hindu pranayama. The Shaolin simply took this universal truth and applied it with martial precision. They recognized that while you can't always control what happens to you, you can always control how you meet it, and that meeting point begins with the inhale and exhale moving through your body right now. Modern life bombards us with stimuli designed to trigger our stress responses. Notifications, deadlines, conflicts. They all conspire to keep us in a state of heightened alertness. The solution isn't to eliminate all stressors, an impossible task, but to change how we respond to them. This begins with the breath, not as an occasional technique pulled out in moments of crisis, but as a constant practice that reshapes your nervous system over time. The Shaolin didn't wait until they were in battle to start breathing properly. They trained it daily until proper breathing became their default. So start small. Set reminders to check your breathing throughout the day. Notice when you're holding your breath or breathing shallowly. Practice extending your exhales, which particularly activate relaxation response. Over time, you'll find what the Shaolin knew. In the space between inhale and exhale lies the power to face anything without being overwhelmed. Your breath is your anchor, and no storm can drag under a ship that's properly anchored.
5. The mirror doesn't lie.
but your thoughts do. You stand in front of the mirror, and what do you see? The first gray hair that wasn't there yesterday. The lines around your eyes that seem deeper this morning. The way your skin doesn't snap back like it used to. Your mind immediately starts telling stories about what these changes mean. That you're declining, that your best days are behind you, that time is stealing something precious from you. But here's the truth, your thoughts won't tell you. The mirror shows reality, but your interpretation of it is pure fiction. The Shaolin monks had a completely different relationship with their reflections. When they looked at their bodies, scarred from training, weathered from years of discipline, they didn't see deterioration, they saw living history. Every callus on their hands told the story of thousands of hours gripping wooden dummies. Every faded bruise on their shins whispered of kicks practiced until the bones vibrated. Their bodies weren't decaying, they were evolving into something more interesting, more capable, more real with each passing year. Modern society teaches us to fear this natural progression, to fight it with creams and procedures and denial, but the Shaolin knew better. They understood that aging isn't the enemy, it's the natural result of surviving. Consider this, when a tree grows old, it doesn't become less valuable, it becomes more unique. The gnarled branches tell of storms weathered, the thick trunk speaks of seasons endured. Nobody looks at an ancient oak and thinks, this tree was better when it was a sapling. They stand in awe of its longevity. Your body works the same way. Those laugh lines, they're proof you've found joy. Those scars, they're evidence you've healed. The slight stiffness in your joint, it's not a defect. It's your body's way of reminding you to move with more awareness now than you did at 20. The problem isn't the changes themselves, it's the stories we attach to them. When you compare yourself to your younger self, you're not making a fair comparison. You're comparing your current reality to a filtered memory. That version of you didn't have the wisdom you have now. That version made mistakes you wouldn't repeat. That version hadn't yet lived through the experiences that shaped who you are today. The Shaolin would tell you this is like comparing a raw block of wood to a carved statue. Both have value, but they serve completely different purposes. There's a practice in Shaolin philosophy where students are taught to observe their reflections without judgment, not to critique, but to witness, to see their faces as maps rather than masks. When you try this, something shifts. That gray hair becomes a badge of survival rather than a symbol of decline. Those strong shoulders that now carry slight ache, they're the same shoulders that carried children, burdens, responsibilities, and didn't buckle. Your body isn't failing you, it's adapting to everything you've asked of it. This perspective changes everything about aging. Instead of fighting time, you start working with it. You train differently, not to recapture your 20-year-old body, but to create the strongest possible version of your current body. You dress differently, not to hide your age, but to express the person you've become. You move through the world differently, not with the frantic energy of someone trying to outrun time, but with the steady confidence of someone who knows their worth isn't tied to their reflection. The next time you catch yourself criticizing what you see in the mirror, take a Shaolin approach, look closer. That face has smiled through joy and set like stone through hardship. Those hands have created, comforted, and carried. Your body isn't a museum piece meant to be preserved in perfect condition. It's a living document, constantly being rewritten. The wrinkles aren't errors, they're edits. The changes aren't defects, they're the inevitable and beautiful marks of a life being lived. 6. The best defense? No attack. Let stupidity pass you by. Imagine this. You're walking down the street when someone bumps into you and immediately starts yelling, calling you names, blaming you for their own clumsiness. Your face gets hot. Your fists clench. Every instinct tells you to fire back, to put this person in their place, to defend your honor. Now imagine something else. You take a deep breath, step around them, and keep walking without a word. Which response leaves you stronger? The Shaolin masters understood something most people never learn. Not every provocation deserves a response. In fact, most don't. They trained for years to develop devastating fighting skills, then spent even longer learning when not to use them. This wasn't weakness, it was advanced strategy. They knew that energy is finite, and every moment spent on pointless battles is a moment stolen from what truly matters. Modern life bombards us with opportunities to engage in useless conflict, road rage, social media arguments, office politics, and most people take the bait every time. The Shaolin would watch this behavior with pity. Why exhaust yourself swatting at flies when you could be conserving that energy for real challenges? There's a saying in martial arts: the master has won the battle before it begins. This doesn't mean they fight better than everyone else. It means they're so selective about their battles that by the time they engage, victory is inevitable. The same principle applies to daily life. When you stop rising to every slight, ignoring petty insults, and refusing to be drawn into drama, something remarkable happens. You gain an almost unfair advantage. While others are draining themselves in meaningless skirmishes, you're conserving energy, maintaining clarity, and positioning yourself for the moments that actually count. Consider how most people handle criticism. Someone makes a snide remark about their work, and they immediately jump to justify, explain, or counterattack. The Shaolin approach would be different. First, they'd ask, is this person's opinion worth my energy? If the answer is no, and it usually is, they'd let the words pass like wind through trees. Not because they're afraid of conflict, but because they respect their own focus too much to divert it. This isn't about suppressing anger. It's about transcending the need to react at all. This principle extends far beyond physical confrontations. Think about how much time people waste arguing online, trying to prove strangers wrong, or the energy expended holding grudges over minor slights, or the mental space occupied by resentment toward difficult family members. The Shaolin would see all this as energy leakage, precious resources trickling away for no return. Their strategy? Build an inner fortress so secure that petty attacks don't even register. When insulted, they wouldn't think, how dare they, but how interesting that they feel the need to do that. Then they'd return to what actually matters. There's incredible power in this approach. When you stop engaging with nonsense, you accomplish two things simultaneously. First, you frustrate those who thrive on drama, like refusing to play a game leaves the other person holding the ball. Second, and more importantly, you train your mind to recognize what deserves your attention. Over time, you develop an almost supernatural ability to spot true threats amid the noise. Most attacks in daily life aren't real dangers. They're tests of your discipline. Pass them by and you remain untouched. This doesn't mean becoming passive or avoiding all conflict. Sometimes confrontation is necessary. The difference lies in choosing your battles rather than having them chosen for you. The Shaolin warrior didn't avoid fights. They avoided wasting fight. They measured each potential conflict against a simple question: will engaging make me stronger or weaker? If the answer wasn't clearly stronger, they walked away. Try this for 1 week. When someone cuts you off in traffic, breathe instead of honking. When a coworker makes a snide comment, smile instead of retaliating. When internet strangers provoke, close the tab instead of responding. Notice what happens. You'll feel lighter, more in control, with energy to spare for what truly matters. That's the Shaolin secret. Sometimes the strongest move is no move at all. Let fools exhaust themselves. You have better things to do. 7. Empty your cup. Unlearn to learn. There's a moment that comes for everyone who pursues mastery, whether in martial arts, business, art, or life. It's the moment when you realize everything you've learned so far might be wrong. Not completely wrong, but incomplete, outdated, limited by the perspective you had when you first learned it. The Shaolin monks had a name for this moment: the emptying of the cup. Picture an actual cup filled to the brim with tea. Someone comes to pour you a new, better brew. But where would it go? It would spill over the sides, wasted. Your mind works the same way. When it's too full of what you already know, there's no space for new understanding. This is why the most dangerous person in any room isn't the ignorant beginner. It's the intermediate who thinks they've figured it all out. The beginner still has empty space to fill. The intermediate's cup is full, and until they empty it, they'll never progress beyond where they are.
Modern education systems train us to accumulate knowledge, not to question it. We're rewarded for having answers, not for admitting we might be wrong. The Shaolin did the opposite. Their training was designed to systematically dismantle certainty. A student would spend years mastering a form, only to have the master say, "Good, now forget it." Not because the form was useless, but because true mastery requires being able to access the knowledge without being trapped by it. This principle applies brutally to aging. What made you successful at 25 might hold you back at 45. The social skills that worked in school become liabilities in the boardroom. The physical training that built your body in youth might injure it now. Most people don't realize they need to change until life forces them to, through failure, injury, or obsolescence. The Shaolin approach is more proactive. Regularly empty your cup before life does it for you. How do you actually do this? Start by identifying your most cherished assumptions about yourself, your work, your relationships, and ask, what if the opposite were true? The businessman who believes aggression is the only path to success might discover the power of patience. The artist convinced their first style defines them might find liberation in experimenting. This isn't about rejecting what you know, it's about not being imprisoned by it. There's a neurological basis for this. Our brains create neural pathways that become more rigid with age and repetition. The same mental routines that once served us become ruts. The Shaolin solution: deliberate discomfort. Train left-handed if you're right-handed. Study a language that works completely differently from your native tongue. Seek out people who challenge your worldview rather than confirm it. This isn't natural. Our brains are wired for efficiency, not growth, which is why it must be intentional. The resistance you feel when confronting new ideas isn't a sign you're wrong, it's proof you're at the edge of your current understanding. That discomfort is the feeling of your mind expanding. Most people avoid this feeling their entire lives. They surround themselves with familiar ideas, people who agree with them, work that doesn't challenge their assumptions. Then they wonder why they feel stagnant at 50. The Shaolin masters maintained their edge into old age because they never stopped being students. Every morning, they approached their training as if they knew nothing. This humility, this willingness to empty their cups daily, is what kept their skills sharp when others deteriorated. Your expertise shouldn't be a wall that protects you from new ideas. It should be a foundation that allows you to reach higher. Next time you catch yourself thinking, "I know how this works," pause. That thought is your cup filling to the brim. The masters would whisper, "Empty it, make space." The best knowledge always arrives when you admit you still have room to learn. 8. Fall down. 7. Rise up. 8. Failure is the drill. Pain is information. Most people misinterpret the message. When they fall, literally or metaphorically, they take it as a sign to stop. The Shaolin took it as a sign to continue, but differently. There's a reason their training halls had wooden floors worn smooth by generations of falling bodies. Because real skill isn't forged in success, but in intelligent repetition of failure. Consider how most people approach learning something new. They try once, maybe twice. If they don't succeed immediately, they conclude, "I'm not good at this." The Shaolin would find this laughable. Imagine a student attempting their first backflip, falling and declaring, "Well, I guess I can't do backflips." The master wouldn't console them. He'd make them try again and again, not out of cruelty, but because he knows the body learns in failure what it can never learn in success. This principle explains why some people progress rapidly while others plateau early. The difference isn't talent, it's tolerance for productive failure. When a Shaolin student practices a kick, they don't stop when they get it right once. They practice until they can't get it wrong. Every failure along the way, every mistimed strike, every loss of balance isn't a mistake to avoid, but data to incorporate. The student isn't failing less as they progress. They're failing better. Modern culture has this backwards. We celebrate natural talent over earned skill. We hide our struggles and only show polished results. This creates the illusion that mastery comes easily to some, when in reality every expert has a hidden history of faults you'll never see. The Shaolin were ruthless about exposing this process. Their training deliberately induced failure, pushing students beyond their limits to show them where the limits actually were, not to discourage, but to provide the precise map for improvement. There's a neurological magic to this approach. When you fail at a physical movement, your brain pays hyper attention to what went wrong. The same neural pathways that fired incorrectly strengthen with each correction. This is why proper practice doesn't just make perfect, it makes permanent. The Shaolin didn't just train more than others, they trained more intelligently. They understood that 10 faults with awareness beat 100 repetitions with none. This applies beyond physical skills. Every entrepreneur knows their first failed business taught them more than any MBA. Every writer's early rejections contain the seeds of their future voice. The difference between those who succeed and those who don't isn't whether they fail. Everyone fails. But what they do with the information failure provides. Most people treat failure as a full stop. The Shaolin treat it as a comma. Aging amplifies this principle. When you're young, you can brute force your way through challenges. Recovery is quick. Energy is abundant. As you age, this approach stops working. The Shaolin solution: fail smarter, not less, just with more awareness. The 60-year-old martial artist doesn't train like the 20-year-old. They train with precision the young can't match. Their years of faults have taught them exactly how to fall, how to recover, how to turn apparent setbacks into advantages. This is the hidden gift of persistence. Not that you eventually stop failing, but that you learn to fail in ways that serve you. The master's perfect form wasn't born from never stumbling. It was forged through thousands of stumbles, each one teaching something new. Your failures aren't proof you shouldn't continue. They're the only way to continue properly. So next time you fall in your career, your relationships, your personal growth, don't count how many times you've hit the ground. Count how many times you've gotten up. The Shaolin would tell you, the rising matters more than the falling. Because while everyone falls, only those who rise again move forward. 9. The mountain doesn't move, but you can climb it. You wake up one morning, and the mountain is still there. That problem that's been weighing on you for months, maybe years. The financial struggle, the health issue, the relationship that never seems to improve. Day after day, it looms in the distance, unmoving, unchanging. Most people spend their energy wishing the mountain would disappear. They complain about its existence. They compare their mountain to others and wonder why theirs has to be so steep. The Shaolin monks took a different approach entirely. They understood something fundamental. Mountains don't move, but climbers do. There's a famous Shaolin training exercise where students would run up the same mountain path every single day, not to reach the top. That wasn't the point. The purpose was to become the kind of person who could handle the climb. At first, their legs would burn. Their lungs would scream for air. Some days they wouldn't even make it halfway before collapsing. But over time, something remarkable happened. The mountain didn't get smaller. The students got stronger. The path didn't become easier. They became more capable. This is the essence of Shaolin wisdom applied to life's obstacles. Stop waiting for your problems to change and start changing what you bring to them. Modern psychology calls this the locus of control. People who believe they're at the mercy of external circumstances
who see their mountains as impossible to climb, live in constant frustration. Those who focus on what they can control, their training, their mindset, their daily effort, find power even in the face of immovable obstacles. The Shaolin didn't waste time praying for easier lives. They prayed for greater strength. They understood that the purpose of the mountain isn't to block your path, it's to reveal what you're made of. Consider how this applies to aging. The body's natural decline is a mountain that no one avoids. You can't stop time. You can't prevent all illness or injury, but you can decide how you'll meet these challenges. Will you become brittle and resentful, or will you train your flexibility, both physical and mental? The 70-year-old Shaolin master doesn't have the same body he did at 20, but he has something more valuable: decades of learning exactly how to move within his current limits. He's not fighting the mountain of age. He's learned all its contours and climbs it with precision. This principle transforms how we approach any persistent problem. Stuck in a job you hate, the mountain isn't the job market. It's your own skills and courage to change. Struggling with anxiety, the mountain isn't your brain chemistry. It's your daily practices to manage it. The Shaolin would tell you that every morning, when you open your eyes and see that same mountain waiting, you have exactly two choices: complain about its existence or start climbing. One approach leaves you exhausted and bitter. The other, though equally tiring, leaves you stronger with each step. There's a neurological basis for this resilience. When we repeatedly face and overcome challenges, our brains develop what researchers call stress inoculation. Like a vaccine introduces a small dose of a virus to build immunity, regular exposure to manageable difficulties makes us more resistant to life's larger blows. The Shaolin monks were masters of this principle long before it had a scientific name. Their daily training wasn't just about physical conditioning. It was about teaching their nervous systems that obstacles are to be engaged with, not feared. This isn't about naive positivity. The Shaolin weren't deluded. They recognized real suffering in the world, but they also understood that within every constraint lies opportunity. A prisoner has limited physical freedom, but can cultivate boundless mental freedom. A poor man has limited resources, but can develop unmatched resourcefulness. The mountain of circumstance may limit certain paths, but it always leaves others open, if you're willing to look for them. So today, when you face your mountain, that problem that seems immovable, ask yourself the Shaolin question: how can I become the kind of person who can climb this? Not how can I make this go away? That shift in perspective changes everything. The mountain never moves, but with each step upward, neither do you. Death is the final master. Live like you're already gone. There's a story about a Shaolin monk who carried his own coffin with him wherever he traveled, not out of morbidity, but as a constant reminder: today could be the day. While others slept through their lives, he remained startlingly awake, not because he was special, but because he never forgot what most people spend their lives avoiding. This ends. For the Shaolin, death wasn't a distant tragedy to fear. It was the most powerful teacher alive. Modern culture treats death as either a horror to be delayed at all costs, or a vague abstraction to ignore until forced to confront it. The Shaolin did neither. They trained with death, looking over their shoulders, not to scare themselves, but to clarify what actually mattered. There's a brutal honesty that comes when you truly internalize your own mortality. Suddenly, the petty arguments that consumed your energy yesterday seem absurd. The fears that held you back reveal themselves as paper tigers. The time you wasted on distractions becomes painfully obvious. This is why the monks could move through life with such focus. They weren't laboring under the illusion of endless tomorrows. Imagine if you lived with this awareness, not as a paralyzing fear, but as a clarifying lens. How would you spend today if you knew it might be your life? Not in some dramatic bucket list frenzy, but in quiet authenticity. Would you really spend hours scrolling through social media? Would you tolerate that toxic relationship? Would you delay pursuing what calls to you? The Shaolin's answer was simple: we already are dying. just slowly enough to pretend otherwise, and this pretense is what robs us of fully living. There's a training exercise where Shaolin students would meditate in grave sites, not to frighten them, but to ground them in reality. Sitting with the bones of those who came before, they'd confront the unvarnished truth. This will be me. From that sobering realization came an unexpected liberation. If all paths lead to the same end, then why not choose the most meaningful one now? Why not speak the truth today? Why not love fully while you can? This wasn't depressing, it was the opposite. By removing the illusion of permanence, every moment gained weight and color. This principle explains why so many people report feeling more alive after near-death experiences. The brush with mortality strips away all pretense, leaving only what's real. The Shaolin sought to maintain this clarity without needing catastrophe to trigger it. Their daily practice was, in essence, rehearsing for death, not to dwell on it, but to ensure they didn't waste the life preceding it. When you train with the awareness that today's practice could be your last, you don't hold back, you don't save your best for some imagined future moment. You pour yourself completely into now. Aging naturally brings this truth closer. The body's gradual decline is death's whisper growing louder. Most people respond by clinging tighter to youth, chasing the past rather than facing forward. The Shaolin approach was radically different. They let each gray hair, each new ache, serve as another reminder to live while they still could. A master in his 80s would train not to recapture his youth, but to honor whatever strength remained. There's profound dignity in this approach, not fighting the inevitable, but using its approach as fuel to burn brighter with the time left. Practical application is simple but challenging. Start asking the death question daily. Not what would I do if I were dying tomorrow? That's too easy to romanticize. But did I live today in a way I'd be proud of if death came tonight? If the answer is no, you still have time to adjust. Not tomorrow, now. This moment. The email can wait. The grudge can be released. The kind word can be spoken. The mountain you've been avoiding can be faced. The Shaolin didn't become legendary because they feared death less than others. They became legendary because they let that awareness make them more alive than others. Your mortality isn't a threat. It's the only reason anything matters. The clock is ticking, but that's not a tragedy. That's what makes your choices sacred. Aging isn't about losing strength. It's about redirecting it. The Shaolin didn't fear time. They used it. Your best years aren't behind you. They're ahead. If you train your mind, embrace the grind, and focus on what truly matters.